That morning during the staff meeting, Trrower was briefing his advisors about the incoming correspondence when one letter particularly caught his attention. The letter came from an 11-year-old child named Mamadu who collected garbage for a living. When his advisors wondered why this child's letter was special among thousands of others, Trrower read the letter aloud. The child wrote that he collected garbage every day but had dreams, wanting to change his country like Trrower did, asking if it was possible. Everyone in the room fell silent. But the most heartbreaking part was at the end of the letter. The child said he wanted to be like Trrower, but everyone told him that a garbage collector's child could never become president, asking if they were right. That day, Trrower wrote a response not just to one child, but to all of Africa. Mamadu Diarra's story began in Sissin, one of Ouagadougou's poorest neighborhoods. This 11-year-old child spent most of his life on the dusty streets of the city. Every morning before sunrise, he would wake up, take an old plastic bag and a metal stick, and begin his daily work. Garbage collection was not easy work. It took hours to sort through heavy garbage containers, identify valuable materials, and collect sellable plastic, metal, and paper. Mamadu's family represented one of the tragic stories seen in many parts of Africa. His father had died in a traffic accident when the child was young, and his mother had become unable to work due to a serious illness. With no other source of income in their household, Mamadu had become the family's sole breadwinner. The small amount of money he earned each day from selling recyclable materials he collected barely covered his mother's medications and daily food. Despite these harsh living conditions, Mamadu's greatest dream was to attend school. His heart ached when he saw his peers running happily with their school bags. He had taught himself the alphabet and learned to read and write from torn books he found in garbage containers. When he had the opportunity to watch a neighbor's television, he especially followed the news. It was in this way that he learned about Ibrahim Traoré's story. Traoré's difficult childhood years, military career, and eventual rise to leadership of Burkina Faso had deeply affected Mamadu. He had learned that this young leader came from humble origins, understood the people's problems, and was trying to make great changes for his country. In Mamadu's eyes, Trrower was proof that the impossible was possible, evidence that someone from ordinary background could reach the highest office. The idea of writing a letter had been forming in Mamadu's mind for weeks. But he had no money for paper or pen. Finally, he pieced together scraps of paper he had collected from garbage containers and began writing the words he had thought about for so long with a pencil borrowed from a neighbor. He carefully chose each word, trying to erase his mistakes. In his letter, he told Trrower about his admiration, his own dreams, and most importantly, his determination to fight against society's prejudices about him. The most touching part of the letter was the internal conflict the child experienced. On one hand, he had big dreams, serving his country, becoming a leader like Trrower, eliminating poverty. On the other hand, everyone around him telling him that a garbage collector's child could never become a great man was shaking his self-confidence. This dilemma was felt in every line of the letter. The inner world of a child torn between great hopes and deep fears. Taking the letter to the presidential palace was another adventure in itself. Mamadu first thought about sending it by mail but had no money for stamps. Finally, he gathered courage and went all the way to the palace gates. Security guards initially approached with suspicion. What business did a child who smelled of garbage and wore torn clothes have there? But Mamadu's determination and sincerity impressed them. They accepted the letter and promised it would reach the child. Hundreds of letters reached the presidential office daily. Most were complaints, requests, or thank you letters from adults. But Mamadu's letter was different. First, the handwriting was very childish, and the paper was not ordinary. It consisted of pieces collected from garbage containers and put together. Secretary Fatima couldn't hold back her tears when she first read this letter. The content of the letter was both emotional and thought-provoking. Mamadu introduced himself, told about his difficult living conditions but didn't complain. Instead, he shared his dreams and stated that he was inspired by Traoré. The most touching part was the child's sincere questions. Could a child who collected garbage really do great things? Could social prejudices be overcome? Was it really possible to become a leader like Trrower? When Trrower read the letter, he was deeply shaken. What this child wrote reminded him of his own childhood years. He too had grown up in difficult conditions, had big dreams but faced skeptical approaches from people around him. The internal conflict Mamadu experienced, the tension between big goals and social pressures, was the path Trrower had also walked. The decision to write a response to the letter had both personal and political significance for Trrower. This was not just a private letter written to a child. It was also a message given to millions of children in Burkina Faso and Africa. Trrower thought for days about what to write, carefully choosing each word. In his response letter, Trrower told Mamadu his own story in detail. He shared the difficulties he experienced in childhood, obstacles in his educational process, and struggles in his military career. But most importantly, He emphasized that success came not from social status but from determination, hard work, and right values. He wrote to Mamadu that a child who collected garbage could become president, and perhaps even be the best president because he knew hardships and understood the people's real needs. The most powerful part of the letter lay in the concrete advice Traoré gave to Mamadu. He suggested continuing education, developing reading and writing skills, and not listening to negative voices around him. He also noted that even while doing garbage collection work, he could develop leadership skills. He could learn to take responsibility, work systematically, and overcome difficulties. At the end of the letter, Traoré added an invitation to host Mamadu at the palace. This invitation carried symbolic meaning beyond a sincere gesture. The president was ready to host a garbage-collecting child in his palace. This situation showed that he didn't care about social status differences and that every child was valuable. When the letter reached the media, it caused a great impact. Television channels, newspapers, and social media platforms shared this story extensively. People appreciated Traoré's gesture and support messages began pouring in for Mamadu. The story crossed African borders and was also featured in international media. Mamadu's palace visit became one of the unforgettable moments in Burkina Faso's history. The little child came to the palace wearing a suit for the first time in his life. Traoré received him according to protocol rules, showing him the same respect he showed to heads of state. These images created great emotional impact throughout the country. During the meeting, Traoré told Mamadu that he would provide educational opportunities, cover school expenses, and provide social support for his family. But more importantly, he promised to mentor the child on leadership, include him in political processes, and help him take responsibility in country management in the future. The impact of this story was not limited to the individual level. Traoré's gesture also led to changes in social policies in Burkina Faso. Programs for children working on the streets were developed, educational opportunities were increased, and support was provided to poor families. Mamadu's story opened a door of hope for thousands of children. Months later, when Mamadu started school, he was already a different child. His self-confidence had increased, his goals had become clearer, and most importantly, his belief that he could overcome social prejudices had strengthened. His classmates might have initially known him as the garbage collector child, but now they looked at him as the president's guest and future leader. Traoré also drew deep lessons from this experience. He understood that leadership was not only limited to big policies and international relations, but also about touching individual lives and giving hope. Mamadu's letter had reminded him what true leadership meant. This story became legendary over time. Parents throughout Africa began telling their children Mamadu's story. It became a source of inspiration for them to pursue their dreams, believe they could overcome difficulties, and never give up. The correspondence between the garbage-collecting child and the president became a powerful symbol in matters of social mobility and equal opportunity. Years later, when Mamadu completed his university education, he had succeeded in political science. It was no coincidence that he wrote his undergraduate thesis on leadership and social mobility. The journey that small letter had started was helping him gain the knowledge and skills that would indeed carry him to leadership positions one day. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this story lay in the meeting of the child's pure sincerity with a leader's empathy ability. The bond established between two people from two different worlds, one a child struggling to survive in daily life, the other a leader determining the country's fate, showed that human values were stronger than politics. This story, told throughout Africa, proved that hope and determination were not too big to overcome any obstacle. The letter Mamadu dared to write that day had changed not only his own life but the lives of thousands of children. And Traoré's response had gone down in history as the best example of how a leader can touch the people. The transformation that began with a child's innocent question and a leader's heartfelt response demonstrated that true change often starts with the smallest gestures of human connection. In a world where political leaders often seem distant from ordinary citizens, Mamadu's story reminded everyone that leadership at its best is about recognizing the potential in every person, regardless of their circumstances. The ripple effects of this correspondence continued to spread throughout African society. Schools began incorporating the story into their curricula as an example of perseverance and social mobility. Community organizations used it to encourage children from disadvantaged backgrounds to pursue education and leadership roles. The narrative became a powerful tool for challenging social prejudices and expanding people's understanding of who could aspire to positions of authority and influence. For Traoré, the experience fundamentally changed his approach to governance. He instituted regular open letter sessions where citizens, especially children, could write directly to him about their concerns and dreams. These sessions became an important part of his administration's commitment to inclusive leadership and participatory democracy. The story also highlighted the importance of education and literacy in breaking cycles of poverty. Mamadu's ability to read and write, self-taught though it was, had enabled him to communicate his dreams and aspirations to the highest levels of government. This underscored the critical role of education in empowering marginalized communities and creating pathways to leadership. As Mamadu progressed through his education, he became a living symbol of the possibilities that exist when society invests in its most vulnerable members. His academic achievements and growing involvement in community leadership roles provided concrete evidence that social background need not determine life outcomes. The international attention the story received also brought focus to the broader issues of child labor and poverty in West Africa. Development organizations and international donors began directing more resources toward programs that combined education with support for working children and their families. Perhaps most significantly, the story changed conversations about leadership throughout Africa. Traditional notions of who could hold power began to expand as people saw that a child from the most humble circumstances could capture the attention and respect of a head of state. This shift in perception opened doors for many others who had previously felt excluded from leadership opportunities. The legacy of Mamadu's letter continues to inspire new generations of African youth to believe in their own potential and to use their voices to create change. In classrooms across the continent, teachers share this story to encourage students to write, to dream, and to believe that their circumstances today do not define their possibilities tomorrow. The bond between Mamadu and Traoré also evolved over time, becoming a mentorship that extended well beyond their initial correspondence. As Mamadu grew and learned, Traoré provided guidance not just on academic matters but on the responsibilities and challenges of leadership. This ongoing relationship served as a model for how leaders can invest in the next generation and ensure continuity of values and vision. Today, Mamadu's story serves as a reminder that transformative leadership often begins with the simple act of listening, really listening, to voices that might otherwise go unheard. It demonstrates that some of the most important communications a leader receives may not come through official channels or formal meetings, but through the heartfelt words of a child who dares to dream of a better future. The garbage-collecting boy who wrote a letter had not only changed his own destiny, but had also reminded an entire continent that greatness can emerge from the most unexpected places. His story became proof that in Africa, as everywhere else, the future belongs to those who dare to believe in themselves and who find leaders willing to believe in them too.